Let me bring to the stage Madame Marie-Christine Gasingirwa, who is, I need some applause, please. Fantastic, that's much better. My fellow Rwandese, you better applaud louder than that. Madame Marie-Christine is the Director General for Science, Technology and Research at the Ministry of Education in Rwanda. Welcome, it's good to have you. I would also like to bring to the stage very important representative of a very important partner of the Africa Innovation Summit. And her name is Maria Cristina Russo, who is the Director for International Cooperation in the Directorate General of Research and Innovation of the European Union. As she's coming up, I would like to acknowledge the fact that the European Union and her Directorate General, and her in person, were instrumental in supporting this summit. Many of us are here because of the investment that they have made in this summit, and I have a feeling they have great expectations of what's to come from it. So Maria Cristina, welcome, and thank you very much for your fantastic support. I'd like to invite, I hope she's in this room, somebody I met in New York. I do see her in this room. A while back, I don't know if she remembers, Madame Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, and the first lady to hold this post. Welcome, Madame Vera.
Thank you.
It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Look forward to having this exchange. And last but not least, I put him last because he's a friend of mine. This is Craig Wing, a serial entrepreneur who told me that he makes breakfast cereals. And I told him I'd steal his joke. Craig Wing, welcome. He's also a Tutu Fellow, ex-Googler, and a man who has quite a few ideas about the future of innovation. So this is your panel. Welcome to all of you. And we look forward to having this conversation. We have quite a bit of time, and I'm going to ask that you also prepare your questions, interventions, and comments, because we're going to open up the floor for a much more interactive session. I think there's going to be some big things we want to be talking about here, and we really very much would like to hear your thoughts, your experiences, your fears, your optimism around innovation and improving things for this continent of ours, for Africa. So let me start by asking you a question, and then you can expand on it over a period of 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. But I'd like to start with you, Marie-Christine. There's this notion of invention and innovation. Is there a difference? Is there a difference in the work that you're doing at the Ministry of Education? Do you distinguish between invention and innovation? And if you do, what is that distinction? And if you don't, does it really matter? Welcome.
I think it does. There is a difference between the two. Oh, thank you very much. With invention, you start from nothing. But with innovation, you modify the old invention to make it more productive, more appealing, more attractive.
So how does that, so what do you do here in the Ministry of Education in Rwanda? Do you focus on invention, or is that too hard, basic science, or do you focus on innovation? And if it's an innovation, what is your focus and how does it manifest in the work?
We start from non-inventions to innovations, because we've got youngsters and everybody who need to always add some life, to start from what is known, to modify to make it more suitable with time. Because the old-fashioned types may not always be applying to new modern times. So innovation is taken as a way of, one, to encourage creativity, to encourage productivity, and livelihood within the youth. Because innovations are very important, because times are changing. What was good yesterday is not good today, and it's not good for tomorrow. So it's one way of keeping the youth alert. Learn with time, use known principles, make use of them so that in the process you can make the world better than it is today. Moreover, these days we talk so much about the market-oriented life. So to always, it encourages competitivity within the youth to meet the demand of the market so that people are alert. always very ready to learn, very to be constructive and productive, to be useful to the world in which they live.
And how do you do it here in Rwanda specifically? Give us some specific examples of how you're trying to promote innovation through the Ministry of Education.
Yes, I will start by giving an example. You know, typically we all talk about science, technology, and innovation. And to be able to make use of it like it is in all African countries, for example, we believe in science and technology to be able to transform our economy. So one of the ways to bring about this is using policies. In Rwanda, we've got science, technology, and innovation policy that has been formulated to be able to bring out the goodness, to bring out the youth to be participating in the development of the country. So according to our STI policy, there are 4 main objectives which we use. One is for knowledge acquisition to all levels, from non-formal education to formal education. You provide the knowledge so that from this knowledge you be able to build on it. And then, in addition to that, we talk about knowledge creation, that is through research. To be inquisitive, to create knowledge using the known principles, fundamental laws, so that you can create more knowledge, a challenge, and to be able to be useful. And then the third one is knowledge transfer. What is this knowledge for? It's supposed to be finding solutions to problems that have been identified to make life easier. And then, with those 3, there is a 4th one, which is development of cultural innovation. You will provide the knowledge, you will stimulate them to be inquisitive and research, and then transfer this knowledge to stakeholders, people who need this knowledge to be able to apply it. So this innovation is built on this, and that's what we're encouraging the youngsters in all ways, to be creative, to be critical thinkers, to be able to analyze, to formulate ideas, and in the process, of course, that is innovation.
So let me dig a little bit, because you're saying this is what the policy is saying. How are you doing it on the ground? You know why I asked this question?
Yes.
There are many young Rwandese here.
Sure.
I'm sure many of them are very creative people, and they're looking to you, madam, and saying, how do I get into her office so that I can be supported in the work that I'm doing? How do you do it on the ground?
Thank you very much. We translate it in encouraging them to be, from the way we teach, for example. The type of education, the old type of education that was rote memory and all this, that was not good. Now they want to be active, to be able to be critical, to think of solutions. Critical thinkers, to be contributing what they are doing, and then we encourage them to in project work. This is the way it is. Or we formulate project in the way they identify the problem, and they try to seek solution, and then share with the others. In fact, just before I came here, there is one of those students, Rwandan youth, who came to say, our project, they took part in a competition in Dubai, I think last year.
Yeah.
And then this time you said, we didn't manage, but the group that took up this time, the second phase, they have won, they're going to compete in London. So that is a way, it is manifest that what you are encouraging to do innovation, they're taking it up serious, and the rewards are there. Yes.
My final question to you, what is the most exciting thing that you have seen in your time at the Ministry of Education that is innovative?
Innovative. Most exciting thing, there are so many, I don't know if I can rank them, because one of those is encouraging when you see somebody bubbling with enjoyment, see my product has won award. My product's been accepted in the market. There is nothing more encouraging than seeing the youngster who realizes that you have opened his horizon to possibilities. Instead of being closed like this, in other words, it is like you provided him wings to fly and seek fresh pastures.
Amazing. So the most exciting thing you've seen is the bright eyes of the young ones.
Yes.
What they do. Wonderful. Thank you. Maria Cristina, you have made a big investment in this summit. It's a big sign of optimism about Africa. So let me ask you this. When you look around the world, you know, the DG EU is looking at other spaces in the world, Latin America, Asia, and exciting things are happening in terms of innovation. Where does Africa feature?
Thank you. I think that Africa is a very important place when we look around the world. And that's why also we made this huge investment in participating to the summit and in supporting the summit and the participation of so many innovators. We have seen, you see countries and regions in the world which have been very, very keen in developing innovation, in bringing the research results to the market. I think we in the European Union, we are good at that, but we are not great, and we are improving. We want to improve. That's also why we will launch tomorrow, by the way, a new research and innovation program which will see the creation of the European Innovation Council. And when we look at Africa, we think that there are huge opportunities in Africa. I have seen around a bit some really incredible young people. I link to Marie-Christine that brought some very good ideas into the market. And I think Africa, both for the population, for the resources it has, for the creativity, has really a great, great potential in innovation. And we in the European Union, we have the political willingness and we have also the instruments to work together to create synergies between our innovation ecosystems.
You mentioned one of the challenges that you're getting better at the European Union is bringing products or innovations to market in elements of commercializing. It's something that Simba from Zimbabwe made a big point of in his remarks at the opening. So what are some of the things that you are finding you have to overcome, and what lessons do you have from that process for those of us here in Africa to commercialize our innovations?
First of all, we have to overcome what we still have in Europe as being afraid of the risk. You know, there is a certain moment when you develop a research and then you have to put the product in the market, and you need some support in order to be able to face this moment and also to face the risk. It's a culture that we do not have a lot in Europe, and we have to overcome that. And with this new European Innovation Council, we will set up also some mechanism to support this phase and to support this risk issue. So that's certainly something. Then we have also a bureaucracy problem which exists in Europe, but I was impressed because one of my colleagues that are here said that yesterday had some meetings with some of the innovators here in Rwanda, and it seems that you're very good at that already. So maybe there is also something that we can learn. But I think these are the two main elements that should be overcome: the risk and the red tape.
Risk and red tape. Again, I'm going to quote from Simba because I really was inspired by what he said. Government regulation. You work in, I don't know what to call the European Union, a multi-government, a multilateral institution. And the European Union is known sometimes for being really bureaucratic. Lots of processes and laws and regulations. How do you innovate that system so that it enables and it facilitates people to take risks and to make innovations that are actually meaningful and successful? How do you innovate the actual system in which you work?
But I mean, your question has two aspects. First of all, the innovating the EU in itself, and we are going to bring changes in the EU. We have new members that are coming. We have a big member which is going out. So if you want, we are in continuous innovation and also adaptation of our institutional system to the new to the new situation of the EU in terms of memberships and also in terms of the political priorities. And that's something that our heads of governments will discuss not later than now at the end of June in one of these European councils that we have. But more specifically, in terms of research and innovation, first of all, there is something that I would like to say, that we have the biggest research and innovation program in the world, the biggest multilateral research and innovation program in the world. We are currently under Horizon 2020. We will have tomorrow a workshop on Horizon 2020 to which I invite all of you to participate, which counts a budget of 80 billion euros. And we will adopt tomorrow the new research and innovation program. which will be called Horizon Europe, but will be open to the world, which should have a budget of 100 billion euros. So, of course, when we speak about procedures and bureaucracy, we do have and we want to be accountable to our Court of Auditors and our Parliament on the way we do spend that money. So if you want, there are some procedures which are important, and I'm very proud that they exist, because they are there in order to make sure that the money is spent correctly to support the excellent scientists and researchers and innovators in Europe and in cooperation with the third world, having said, with the countries outside Europe. Having said that, of course, we are constantly making efforts in order to simplify the procedures, in order to make sure as much as possible that the researchers, the innovators that participate in these programs don't have to spend too much time on unnecessary requirements. So we constantly adapt the procedures on the basis of the feedback that we receive from the participants to our programs.
Yeah. So I want to connect Marie-Christine and Maria Cristina. 80 billion euro, 100 billion euro. There are many young Rwandese in here, others listening to us across satellites. How do young Africans access that kind of money? Do they go through their governments? Do they go through corporations? Do they come walking to your office now that we know where you are and what you look like?
No, there is only one word to reply to your question, which is excellence.
Excellence.
Excellence. Our funds are research and innovation funds, and they are distributed only based on competitive calls, which are, there is only one criteria, which is excellence. So the young researchers and innovators have to be excellent and participate to our calls, and hopefully they will be part of this program, which is not only money. Money, of course, is important, but it's also networking with the best researchers and innovators in the world.
Again, Simba, you see, everybody's been listening to you. Collaboration, right? You've got to work together, otherwise forget about being excellent alone. Let me go to Madam Vera Songwe. There's this big word that's bandied about called structural transformation. What on earth is structural transformation, and how does innovation drive or bring it about?
Thank you. I don't know if you have my slides, since I see that we have a little bit of time. I have a couple of slides. Can you put it up?
There's some slides. You put them up? I didn't know you had slides.
Yes, I do. Can somebody confirm? There they are. So,
there we go. Okay.
First of all, before I start, I want to thank the government of Rwanda Development Board, for having us here. ECA, of course, my good friend and sister, Claire, for being here. Former Minister of Capo Verde, Cristina Duarte. I think that this idea initially, and one of the reasons I am back here, is because it was born in Capo Verde, and I think that I will connect to that later. But Capo Verde is a small, beautiful island, but wonderful innovations come out of there, and a lot of it happened when Minister Duarte was minister. Of course, Jose Brito has been driving it and is the face of it, so I also want to thank you for bringing it here, and I acknowledge the former Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa that is also here and pushing the reform. And I think this is the African Union reform team, so innovation in the African Union reform team, we're all in Rwanda, is part of it. Now, innovation and structural transformation. Let me just go through the slides, and as I go through them, I will answer your question.
Okay.
Innovation and the theory of it. And I'm so happy that I met with Chisimba, because we've been trying to meet, and we were not able to meet in Addis, and trying to bring you to Addis to come and talk a little bit about innovation. And for that reason also, let me acknowledge in his memory Professor Calestus Juma, who was a huge driver of innovation on the continent. A round of applause to him. He made Africa and Harvard open to Africa and African innovation, and I think that we should not forget. And a lot of the reasons why we do this is to continue that legacy that Professor Calestus Juma left. Next, so I'm just going to go through quickly. I think the biggest discussion around innovation on the continent today is around ICT. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a sense, and I'll connect it again to what was said earlier. Next slide.
Okay.
I'm an economist. For us in economists, Schumpeter is the father of innovation. And he talked about creative destruction. But he talked about innovation as a sequence of invention, innovation, and you talked about it, and I'm very happy that you said that. But then diffusion. And this is the issue. It's diffusion. And then imitation. And I think that there is, and the reason I wanted to do the slides because I want us to take this away. And you said that in a more sort of practical way, is that what we do on the continent now, and it's great, is that we're doing the innovation part. And we're doing some of the invention part. We're not doing the diffusion part. And so when I was preparing for this discussion, I started with, you know, we have a lot of these beautiful innovations that we all cite, and sort of the biggest one I think is M-Pesa. Next slide. But the question is, who is using M-Pesa on the continent?
Yeah.
Have we been able to take it to scale in the diffusion way? That's when innovation begins to make sense. Why do we care? We care because innovation would create jobs, it would add value, it will grow our GDP. We don't care for innovation just for the sake of it. We want it to bring back resources, we want it to create jobs, we want it to improve the prosperity of our societies. That's at the end of the day what we do this for. So I went and I looked at the African countries that have been in the top 100 Global Innovation Index over the last 5 years. As you see, the map is very scant.
Yeah.
This doesn't give you the sense of a continent that is innovating. This doesn't give you the sense of a continent that is ready to move into structural transformation in the kinds of ways in which we will need to see it, with the kinds of populations that we have, with the youth that are coming. And this does not mean that the youth are not innovating. It just means that we're not diffusing that innovation enough for it to get to scale. And scale is the issue, and I think that that is what Chisimba was talking about, is that we need to come together to do scale. And part of coming together to do scale is what we are beginning to do at the policy level, and I'll come back to that. But as you see, you know, the green countries are the ones that have been in the Global Innovation Index 5 times in a row. So they've been there every year, which means they continue to do it. And the light blue ones, Senegal and Mauritius, have been there 3 times. And then you have Egypt, that has been once and is hopefully going to come back. And then you have Ghana and Mozambique. And so basically we need, what you're also seeing is a little bit of a geography in Southern Africa.
Yeah.
You know, we're having a little bit more countries, and Eastern Africa, it's going up. We need to close the gap there. Next slide, please. Internet penetration. This is sort of the joy of Africa. When we want to feel better, we pat ourselves on the back because everybody has a cell phone. But internet penetration, unfortunately, is not so good. And this is why we're not getting the kind of diffusion that we need, because when you invent and when you innovate, then you need to sort of put it on platforms that everybody can see. But what we get again is that you have, again, the green is countries that have 80 to 100% internet penetration in the countries. We have 1 on the continent, and that's Kenya at 85%. So again, we need to do a lot more. And then you have South Africa, you have first Morocco, actually Mali, which is quite interesting. And I don't know if there are any Malians in the room, but hopefully we're getting some innovation out of Mali. But I was very surprised to see Mali there and Tunisia as the second from 60 to 80% internet penetration. So again, we have a different kind of story. The reds mean you're at 0 to 20% internet penetration. Again, it means the craze and the joy about internet penetration on the continent is not as much as we would like to see. There's too many reds. We would rather have more greens and more light blues. Next slide, please. This is a slide of internet penetration and size of country. So the bigger bubble, the outer bubble, is the sort of population size of a country, and the inner bubble is the internet penetration. Again, as you see, in some countries you don't see any gray because the internet penetration is very, very low. In Nigeria, it's 50%. In South Africa, up and orange on the other end, it's about 53%. In Egypt, it's about 52%. But again, the story is, it's not as vast, it's not as spread out as we would like it to be. And there is a lot more work that we can do. And this is in 2017, so this is last year. So again, the continent is not where it should be in terms of diffusion of the kinds of technology that would allow us to innovate the way we want to do it. Next slide. This is growth. We've talked a lot about the fact that there is a lot of internet penetration on the continent. Growth in the last 7 years And many countries have only grown by 20, 30%. So the question is, we know now, 5 years later, 6, 7 years later, the importance of ICT, the internet in our development, in sort of leveling the differences in income, in creating jobs, in making women and the economics closer, making better women empowerment. How come we are not seeing the kinds of policies that then will make internet penetration even faster and even higher? So why is it that 7 years later, in some countries, we only have 3% growth? What is going on the continent? And again, I go back, next slide. And so this is then how all this information on internet penetration, access, availability translates into innovation. Is where are the tech hubs on the continent? Because we know that that's where the innovation is happening. And we don't see that many, again. We see, of course, Kenya, so the yellow colors are those that have more than 25 tech hubs, 25 to 49. And again, Kenya is the champion. Of course, they have 85% internet access. Yes, let's clap for Kenya. We should clap for the ones that are doing well. I think it's a good thing. But this is again showing that when you start getting the right policies and you start putting the right things together, it explodes. So it's no doubt that M-Pesa is all over Kenya and that we're doing all the wonderful things. Then the question becomes, what's happening with the neighborhood? What's happening with the geography around it? And that's where, the next slide, the AU reform and what we're doing is important. When you open barriers, when you say now that we have signed a CFTA, people can trade and there is free movement, it means that if you're an internet guru and you do not have access to the internet in Tanzania, you can go to Kenya. And you can join the many tech hubs that are there, and you can create and you can innovate. So we start getting scale, because at the end of the day, the innovation is not enough, and that's what you were saying. You need to take it to scale. And when Schumpeter talked about creative destruction many, many, many decades ago, he said you need an entrepreneur to move from innovation to scale to market. On the continent today, we need our policymakers to be the entrepreneurs that allow us to move from innovation to scale.
Now that sounds very counterintuitive.
And this is your question on economic transformation, is that we need our policymakers to go from not just being the ones who regulate, but the ones who say, I have M-Pesa in Kenya, I have the drones in Rwanda. Drones in Rwanda are great. But, there is 94 million people in Ethiopia, there's 175 million people in Nigeria. Why can't we take them there? That is when the innovation starts changing growth on the continent. That's when that innovation starts making sense for overall economic growth. That's when the person who invented it becomes the next big thing. And yesterday, if any of you read the Financial Times, you would have seen that Google just bought GitHub, which is an open platform. It cost the market cost was $2 billion. Google bought it for $7.5 billion. Why? Because they have gone to scale. And Google now realizes that open platforms and scale, a few years ago, Google didn't want to hear anything about open platforms. They wanted to close, they wanted to be monopolists. The world is changing and we must go to scale. So if we want to be able to stand in front of this sort of next industrial revolution and talk about it the way we are talking about the future of our youth and our jobs, we must figure out, with the CFTA, with the free movements of people, with the single air transport market, with passports and easy entry, how we can make sure that we scale these developments. And this is where I wanted to talk about Cape Verde, because Cape Verde is, again, when you have the kinds of technology that you need, it doesn't matter whether you come from a small country or a big country. You should be able then to take your production and your productivity to market. When we sit here today with the innovation that is happening in Cape Verde, GDP per capita is $4,000. We would all like to be there, or most of us would like to be there. There's not many countries on the continent that have that kind of GDP per capita, but that's because they have been able to scale their platforms. And I think that this is the message of economic transformation, is how we scale those platforms, how we work with the young kids and these new innovators to say, when we come back next year, your innovation is not confined to Mozambique or Namibia. It becomes innovation that our leaders say, this is going to help me advance, this is going to help me grow, this is going to help me create more jobs. And again, I come back to the question of jobs. We must create jobs, we must create value, and we will do it if we go to scale. And so we should remember the last two things of Schumpeter. The invention and innovation, we're doing well. The next two, is the diffusion and the imitation. It is great to imitate. If you cannot invent, just imitate. But by imitating, you will create jobs, you will increase value, and you will improve prosperity and the betterment of the society. What we are all doing now is imitating from Google. What Alibaba did, essentially, is take to scale an imitation in a place that works really well. So do not be ashamed of imitating and modifying. But really, I think that that is where we want to go. So my message as I sort of talk about economic transformation is first, how can we make sure that we diffuse and we imitate?
Okay, you hear that? There is no, thank you, Dr. Songwe. There is no shame in copying a good idea.
Of course, we have to respect property rights. It was on my so you have to
don't steal it,
yes,
okay?
Don't steal it.
You mentioned policy entrepreneurship, which is scary for policymakers. But I think, let me just tell a very quick story, which I think has something to do with why M-Pesa spread so quickly in Kenya. I was in a meeting with the then central bank governor, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, with 4 or 5 of Kenya's big bankers. I won't mention the name to protect the innocent. And they were asking him essentially to regulate Safaricom because it was eating into their business. And he said, no, Safaricom is not taking deposits. I'm regulating the deposit takers. So let them do what they need to do. I think his resistance to that regulation had a huge effect on M-Pesa spreading out through Kenya and into the region in a manner that maybe in other markets they haven't quite done that. So that level of policy entrepreneurship has a really big multiplier effect. So we need to find more policy entrepreneurs. We need to encourage more. It's risky business. Back to Maria Christina's point. It's risky business making policy entrepreneurship. How can we help them? Craig, you're in the business of risk and thinking about the future. And a serial entrepreneur, started lots of businesses, and you're helping other businesses innovate into the future to succeed. So let me ask you a bit of a different question. Are there any innovations we should be afraid of? Are there things we should be cautious about? How do we resist the more negative effects or negative innovations in this continent as we seek structural transformation?
Thanks, Aidan. So it's a very, very interesting question. I think the first point is that innovation, like technology, I think is agnostic in terms of its creation, right? So technology is neither good nor bad. It becomes good or bad in the hands of the user, right? So technology in itself is agnostic, much like innovation. But to answer your question more directly, are there things that we should be considerate about for the continent around innovation? There are. And we can start at some of the more obvious ones. So the more obvious ones are replacement of jobs by machines, whether it's automation, whether it's mechanization, whether it's artificial intelligence, and the effect on an economy, and more importantly, the effect on the distribution of wealth. So that's the easy one that a lot of people speak about, to say, well, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, should I think about automation in my plant? Should I think about mechanization? Or should I hire 5, 10, 15, 20 people? So I think that's the first thing. But then we start going down the line, and to give you a framing, because I think it's also important to have the framing, is we're talking about 5, 10 years out. So I'm talking about the first part is certainly now, the short term, the first year or two, as we implement some of these innovations, it's replacement of jobs, it's replacement of labor. But moving further down in the longer term horizon, there's questions around the youth bulge, which we spoke about, so Vera mentioned that, around the number of young people in African countries, and the number of unemployment in many countries is over 50%. So on the one side, you've got high unemployment around youth, and on the other side, you've got this mechanization coming through, replacement of jobs, and likely also the replacement of low labor jobs. When you then have a look at any kind of African country that is doing very well, it has a very good triangular shaped demographics, with older people at the top and younger people at the bottom. But suddenly you have a compounded effect looking into the future where we are right now, is where we say the older folks start living longer and longer. And so there's a very interesting stat that came out last year, in fact, by the World Health Organization, that if you're now between the ages of 0 and 17, you're classed as underage. Between the ages of 18 to 65, and I repeat this, between the ages of 18 and 65, you're now classed as youth or young.
18 and 65?
18 to 65. Between the ages of 66 and 79, middle-aged, 80 to 99, elderly, and 100 plus, long-lived. So what that means is we're living longer and longer and longer. And yes, it may take some time to come to Africa. But when you combine that around the top end of the triangle, living longer, suddenly we're sitting around a potential situation where innovations are creating social imbalances, where we have the potential for social unrest because of less work. So suddenly the unemployment rate of 50% plus for youth starts increasing exponentially, and we have this huge recipe for disaster. Moving forward from that, we start getting to some of the more interesting questions, things like liability and guilt, and who's liable for an accident, for argument's sake, with a self-driving car. And so it's based on an old question around the trolley problem. And it's a simple question. The one is, if you're driving in a self-driving car, or you're a passenger in a self-driving car because you don't drive it, from the airport to here, and the car needs to make a decision because something happens, because a car walks in the street, or whatever the case may be, should the car drive off the road and kill you, the passenger, or 10 pedestrians? So there's questions around liability, there's questions that policymakers haven't thought about. And that's something we need to think about. Even further down the line, now we're talking very much 5 to 10 years, is what are the rights for robots? What are the rights for robots, robot unions, if you will? And some may say, well, robots don't have rights, but the owners of those machines may, to say there's an SLA that's come through, you can only work a robot over a certain amount of time. And then we get some of the longer term stuff, things like rights of clones. If I clone myself, does the clone have a right? If it's for organ donation, surely it does. At what point does a machine have rights that accrue to a human being? Because if a machine can think for itself, should it be given rights too? And then other kinds of questions, such as things with CRISPR, genetic manipulation, customized babies. Questions around, should we, if we can, remove malaria from mosquitoes within the continent, should we do it? What are some of the second-order unintended consequences of that? Should we do things like DNA manipulation in food, so GMO times 10? So I think we're heading into a very interesting world where we haven't considered the ethics and morality of technology. And so to your point, are there things we should be concerned about from innovation? Definitely. But I think the way to counter that is to have conversations with the regulators and the people who can make these decisions, who understand the technology. And this was no more apparent to me than the recent Facebook Senate, where Zuckerberg goes across and one of the senators says to him, Mr. Zuckerberg, how does Facebook make money? And he rather sheepishly turns and says, we sell ads. And why that's so pivotal for me is that regulators don't understand how technology works, but are starting to safeguard their populace by saying, how do we ensure that jobs are protected, whereas it should be, how are jobs created? Right? So it's all about conversation. To Simba's point this morning, it's how to do things together.
Craig, you put on the table a very big question that I'm going to ask. Should we innovate our ethics?
Should we innovate our ethics?
Is it time to innovate ethics? You ask about clones' rights, robots' rights. Should we be taxing robots? If it's convenient to have a robot in my factory, should I axe 50 jobs? Aren't we having to reinvent or innovate ethics? Is it something that, as Africa, as an African continent, we should be thinking about now and not later?
Definitely. I think the answer is yes. Definitively, the answer is yes. I think we need to think about ethics from a different perspective. But it's not, I don't think it's about reinventing ethics. I think it's more about saying, well, how do we create an ethical framework to allow us as Africans to be more human? And I say that deliberately because as we become more automated through the fourth industrial revolution, as we do more things around efficiency gains, a lot of the technology will benefit those that have. So the owners of technology will, without a doubt, benefit from technology more, right? What that then comes down to is, as Stephen Hawking says, the biggest threat to humanity isn't technology, but it's capitalism. Right? And so how do we think about this capitalism world around balancing capitalism and economic gain, but at the same time for social development? What's the ethical framework around that? I'll give you one example. Amazon just last year filed a patent, and it was granted, where the employees wear wristbands.
Yeah.
And they can track the physical locale of a worker's hands to say, I need to take a box from here and put it over here. If my hands are out of this range, the bands on my wrist will shake. So now we can track the exact location of where the hands are, right? There's ethical and moral questions around that. But the question that you're asking that we need to answer is, how do we do that within the context of machines and technology to be more human? So we bring back things like dignity. How do we bring back things like self-respect? About saying, well, from my country, South Africa, how do we bring back the concept of Ubuntu? How do we do stuff that those that may have will share with those that don't?
Big questions. This plenary is about opportunities and challenges, and so I thought thinking about the ethical challenges of some of our technologies is worth contemplating. So I want to open it up. If you have any comments or questions, we've been talking for 30 minutes. I've been timing, actually 34 minutes. So if you have any comments or questions, interventions, fears, hopes, excitements, now is the time. There are roving microphones, and I think, oh, there's one over here from our friend Bayo. I can see you. I hope there's a microphone that can come in and meet Bayo here. And there's a second one over here. Two gentlemen. I'm looking for ladies. I can see one hand way at the back over there. So let's start with Bayo here, and then just introduce yourself, where you're from, and then your intervention. Keep it brief if you did.
I will try.
Thank you.
Hello?
Welcome back.
Okay. Aidan, thank you. It's difficult to answer the question where you're from in a world that makes it impossible to answer that question. But I'm from Nigeria by way of India, by way of US. My name is Bayo Akomalafe, and I just want to respond. Thank you for your voices and your participation to everyone. Could we just give a round of applause for them? Everyone just
Thank you, Bayo.
Thank you. But I have a question, a concern, if you will. Okay, let me put it this way. Do you have a sense that innovation, and in the ways we speak about it, might not be apolitical? That it might actually be shielding out, excluding other forms of participating and being in the world? Harry Truman in the 30s, the US president, formulated a 4-point agenda for the world. In short, invited the terminology of development. And that's where we learn to start speaking of ourselves as if societies could be placed on a continuum from less developed to developed. And we tend to speak in those growth patterns today. We speak in terms of skill and innovation, which is the buzzword of the moment. But I wonder what it excludes from the frame. A very brief example, Aidan, you have to let me say this.
One example.
You have to let me say one example. Is the approach to solving climate change. We have Cape Town in a water crisis situation right now. And there's this dude who decided that he could drag an iceberg up from Antarctica, up the coast, my brother is shaking his head, up the coast to Cape Town, and let it melt into usable water. That's the kind of linear thinking that promotes the idea that we can solve our problems unilaterally. So I wonder if, in speaking about growth and skill and innovations in the ways that we do, we're excluding other ways of knowing from voicing themselves out. I'll stop there from now.
Thank you. You ask a philosophical question here, and I'm going to invite, let's get another couple, and then we'll invite some thoughts and reflections. Yes, you gentlemen in the front.
Thank you also very much for the session. But I just want to say something. I didn't hear anything about social innovation and social entrepreneurship. And as the last speaker said, and you asked a very good question, innovation, ethical innovation. What we lack in Africa is the knowledge heritage, the indigenous knowledge, the spiritual heritage we have does not go well with the Western capitalist approach. We have Ubuntu, we have huge, really extraordinary resources that we devalue. Our SIM card, our software, our hardware is full of virus. We need innovation to clean it up, sincerely speaking. Because if we don't have that, we'll always have a problem. And one of the things we need to do is we need, of all the capitals, we need social capital, trust capital among us, ourselves. So we need to learn to not allow divide and rule to continue to divide us, but to come together. We need this kind of social innovations. Why are we failing acquiring them? Always begging outsiders when we have everything. Why we don't recognize our indigenous knowledge, and from our indigenous knowledge we create innovation. Why our universities are not connecting to our communities so that all the knowledge that exists can also be turned into innovation. We fail I'm telling you, I am a professor, but I feel we are failing. Our entire education system needs to be decolonized. Innovation is necessary to actually do it, so that we bring back this extraordinary knowledge. I'm working with the youth. We have the African Talent Hub. I hope all of you could help support us. And we also have the African Union Youth for Change. Some of the young people are here. Diana and others, I think they have come. And the African Union Student Council in Rwanda is wonderful. There's a lot of very energetic, young, very kind students that I meet, and I love to come back here all the time.
Okay.
Because they are really, genuinely they are interested in Africa, and this is genuine. Okay. And I'm happy, and I hope you can communicate with them and interact with them. Thank you.
We'll meet some of them. Thank you. Thank you for raising that important question. Whether our indigenous knowledge, what happens to our trust capital? Some corporations and governments seem to be losing trust as well of the citizens in how they are operating in their own places. I saw a hand back there. Yes, there it is again. And then I come to the front of Simba, and then we'll have a first round of reflections or thoughts on what we've just heard. We'll go back around the room again. Yes, is it yes, ma'am or sir? I can't see you.
Yeah, my name is...
Please introduce yourself, yeah.
My name is Mwangi. I'm an entrepreneur in the food industry, and I come from Kenya.
Yes.
So I have a quick question. A few days ago, I was conversing with my cousin who is pursuing computer engineering in United States University of Africa. And, well, he shared a story of what happened to him while he was trying to put something for Congress where he will get financing to go outside and do a few projects. So a few days before he was to present to an audience like this, he did an idea, he worked out wherever he was supposed to do, and it was indeed a good innovation, which whoever was meant to win will get a scholarship to go and study abroad, a fully sponsored scholarship, and come back in return and get every other thing worked out for him. But unfortunately, the people who are financing the idea, the people who are listening, one day before he was to present it, took the idea, put it nicely, and changed just 2 or 3 things. So actually, and they presented just 5 minutes before him. So the moment they were presenting, he was wondering, how comes my idea has been taken away? And he couldn't actually present due to that. And unfortunately or fortunately, the guys who took the idea, pitched the idea and got the investor to invest in them, and they were taken abroad to study, and that's how he went. So I think up to date is still a challenge when you are asked to bring your innovation or your idea, maybe for those of us who love innovating, as opposed to probably some of us who are in business. And you wonder how to go about it. Yeah. So people with money come, take it and go with it. And before you bring it to the public, you wonder how it came there. Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't know how to solve that problem. Let's hear from Simba, and then we'll come here. A number of issues, I think, some fundamental issues have been raised. Simba, a quick one.
Just a quick one to the lady from the EU. You had mentioned that grants are competitive. Just from personal experience, and this is more to ask, would it be for us African entrepreneurs, please level the playing field? Because when the competitive calls go out, European companies have better IP than us, and then they tend to win these grants. And then the worst part from personal experience, they will then come with the free money, injected as equity in the project, and expect me to find my own equity. We had a situation with one of the grant providers whereby we had applied for a grant and we couldn't get it because they said that your partner has applied for it, right? And this is supposed to be concessionary funding, but they wanted a preferred share of 18%. It was unheard of. So these are practical experiences that we have as entrepreneurs. Say, look, we want to apply for the grants, but let them be fair. Also, the turnaround time. If I'm an innovator and I have to get a product to market in 3 months, but the grant is going to take 1 year to draw down, I'm crowded out of the market. And these are actual experiences and examples.
Thank you, Simba. So a number of issues have come up. I won't summarize the questions, but the themes I'm hearing are as follows. One is the issue about not just tech innovation of the hardware, software kind, but I'm going to call it the wetware kind. You know, the inclusion or exclusion that innovation can sometimes engender So Bayo's asking about innovation being exclusive, and other forms of knowledge and knowing and understanding in organization being crowded out of the market. So that's one area. And then there's the pain of our two innovators and entrepreneurs here about how unfair the world is when they have the great ideas, but there are people probably with deeper pockets who take their ideas and make something of them. Let me start with you, Marie-Christine Gasingirwa, here on the issue of, you're a policymaker in innovation. What of indigenous knowledge? How does that feature in your innovation plans and training plans for the young people in Rwanda?
Well, we stress that very much because one thing is we want to bridge that generational gap using the new knowledge that is being acquired, such that, for example, if you can quote the mission of the Ministry of Education, it says to transform the Rwandan citizens into skilled human capital for socio-economic development of the country by ensuring equitable access to quality education, focusing on combating illiteracy, promotion of science and technology, critical thinking, and positive values. Among the positive values include our values, cultural values. In the process, we would like to encourage the youth to bridge with the old generation, because long before you had the Western type of science or medicine, we were treated using things from the environment. So we want to tap this. That's why we're promoting what we call IKS, Indigenous Knowledge Systems. So that, for example, we could develop fantastic pharmaceutical industry from a traditional medicine men, using herbs or whatever they are. So we're encouraging the youngsters to get close. There is still source information that they can transform to market. So in other words, one of these things we're trying to also it will help us in bridging the digital divide. So bring in modern science, we can call ICT, for these youngsters, for example, in drug production, so that can use our old people to realize, after all, from them, when we have the saying that once an African or elderly man dies, so the knowledge that in these people, bring it out, we still have the environment, they are the custodian of biodiversity. From our biodiversity, we can have a very rich pharmaceutical industry and others. But the question is now, I know it's not only the question of Rwanda, it is all of us. That problem of exploitation is there. And since we believe in collaboration, I think we can also appeal in African Union and all the others. What can we do for protection? Because it is true, one of the mandates of African Union, they want to encourage this. But people are getting suspicious. Do I get out and then my work disappears like that? So that protection is needed, but should not stop people from working, at some time asking an intervention of legal proceedings at a high level. Otherwise, we would be killing the knowledge that is there and innovation of our youth to be contributing to the development of the continent. We've got a rich background of that indigenous knowledge that should be used, not only for pharmaceutical industry, for mine, all sorts of things, because life was there even before. How can we use it? How can we now modernize it for the market need? So that the process, we've got also something there from that one, commercialization of the knowledge. That's all I can say.
Dr. Vera Sogo, what are your thoughts on this issue about indigenous knowledge and cooperation across the continent to protect it and protect the value that it creates and make sure that it stays with those who create the value?
I think two things. First of all, very good questions. Just to give you a statistic, 63 people today in the world have more income than the top 50% of the poor, the bottom 50% of the poor people in the world. So 63 people, individuals, 63 of you if you stand up, have a lot more income than about 3.5 billion people. Your question, and the reason I gave that statistic is to talk about inequality. Your question is really about, does innovation widen the gaps of inequality? And the answer is yes. And I think that what one then wants to do is to see what you do next. And I think when Schumpeter talked about creative destruction, initially when you have a new idea, and yes, we want that. We want to be able to reward people for new ideas. So you do need that space. One, you would have invested, and I'm sure most of you have invested, your parents, your brothers, your crashing out in your friends' houses because you have an interview, you want to pitch your product. So you need then, after that, to be able to sort of come back and say thank you. So we need some time for you to sort of get that revenue and those resources back. But then the question becomes, once you do that, can we tax differently? And what kinds of systems do you then do to re-equalize the income streams that happen? And I think there is a lot of work that's happening on sort of ensuring that the level playing field then happens. And this takes me to the question of property rights. And this is a very, very important question. And part of the African Union next step on the CFTA is actually to discuss questions around property rights. Today, if you need to register an idea, it costs about $1,900. Most people cannot afford that if you're in the 50% sort of lower tranche. And this is again where political entrepreneurship, policy entrepreneurship happens. If you have a Ministry of Research and Development that then says, as country X, if you come with a good idea, we would allow you to register it at least under a trademark temporarily while you grow the idea. This becomes an important opener and level playing field policy. It doesn't cost much to many of our countries because not many people anyway are registering new ideas. So why put such a high barrier to entry? And I think that this is a policy issue that we need to look at. And that goes a little bit to the question on, are we sort of taking external ideas? I think there's a few countries that have done a good job at having antitrust policy on the continent. And antitrust policy is policies against competition and unfair competition. But some have taken it too far because we have just adopted, at independence, we adopted external laws. And so some of the thresholds for entry have made it so high that, I see my colleague here from the IFC, if you're a private sector person on the continent in some of our countries, by the time you do due diligence, by the time you register your idea, by the time we put on so many barriers that you never get to market with the product. And I think we do need to come backwards and look at what are the kinds of barriers that we are putting in place to ensure that there is many more people that can get to market. Now on the question of indigenous versus non-indigenous ideas, I think of a young lady that I met from Ethiopia who is now commercializing the injera product. And she has developed a system around how to make it in a more efficient way, in a much faster way, and to scale. And she's now selling in the big shops in the United States. So I don't think that we want to be protective of our cultural ideas. I think we want to take them to scale. We want to be able to sell akabanga across the world, because that is how we become part of this global community. But then I think we do need to make sure that, in Togo, there is somebody who is doing a fufu mix, and he's developed a small machine to be able to sort of do the traditional. So I think we can marry our indigenous cultures with the external. Again, whether we are in 18th century Africa or the fourth industrial revolution, what we want to do is create value, improve lives, create jobs. It's always the same. And I think that then the question becomes, how do you do it in a way that doesn't create the kinds of gaps where you have 63 people earning more than half of the population of the world? Or they can earn it, but how do you redistribute it is another way of looking at the question.
Okay. I've just been given a note by my bosses. They are faceless and nameless. But we've got to finish soon. So I want to give Craig and Maria Cristina Russo time to respond to that question of leveling the playing field and protecting the value that young people are bringing up, but then the money comes and takes it and makes more money on it. What advice do you have on that issue? I'll start with you, Maria Cristina.
Thank you, but I wanted to say something also on the indigenous culture and knowledge, because it's very important, and I do take your point, but I agree very much with the remarks you made, because me here, I'm bringing the EU's research and innovation program, saying it's open to the world. And in fact, the reason why we want to cooperate with researchers, innovators outside Europe is because we do believe that we need to put all our ideas and knowledge together in order to be able to tackle these societal global challenges that we're going through. So we can learn a lot from Africa, you can learn something from Europe, we can learn from other continents. And I think that this is the basis of knowledge. I mean, knowledge has no frontiers. That's why we do need to work together to aim at our ultimate goal, which is using research and innovation for a better world. As far as the other points that were made, I think that, as I also mentioned before, there is the need to have the framework conditions for cooperation. And this is something that we always address in our policy dialogues with the African Union, with the bilateral countries with which we have policy dialogues and agreements. And you always have to find the right balance between the regulation, which can help to protect property rights and the other framework conditions for innovation, and leaving it free for innovators to express their ideas and to be able to participate in those in those activities. It's not an easy balance. We have these discussions also at European level, and we have this point clearly in our agendas. Of course, there was a mention that was made also to the fact that the EU programs sometimes are not as quickly as an innovator would have liked. But I also mentioned before that we are handling public money, and again here we have to combine two different needs: the needs of ensuring proper accountability of that, and also making the money useful for the purpose. But of course, your experience is very valuable, and any idea and remark that come from you, I would be very happy to listen to.
Thank you. Craig, you do lots of businesses. How do you support Mr. Mwangi over there from Kenya? How does he solve his friend's problem, or any such future problems? Any ideas?
Yeah, 100%. So to answer that, I'm actually going to answer Baya's question as well, because I think it's really important, right? So does the innovation increase the poverty gap or the difference between the rich and poor? The answer is definitively yes. And for that, just a quick summary is the fourth industrial revolution we've spoken about before, just to ensure that everyone in the audience is on the same basis. The first industrial revolution was water and steam that mechanized production. The second industrial revolution was electric power that created mass production. The third one was electronics and IT that automated production. Now, those first three that came across were mostly bound by geographical locale. So the industrial revolution, for argument's sake, started in Manchester. And that's where it started. And so a lot of these previous industrializations were geographically bound. The fourth one that we're in now, which the World Economic Forum states is the fusion of technology blurring physical, digital, and biological, is not bound by geography. Right? And within that context, this is where the question becomes even more specific, because the gaps now between the rich and poor are no longer bound just by physical locale, but those that drive a knowledge and innovation economy. And that's where it becomes exceptionally difficult. One of the most interesting things that I saw was there's a gentleman that you all know who I say right now, who said, whoever wins the AI race will control the world. I don't know if anybody knows who it was. That was Vladimir Putin. Right? Now, it's fascinating that of all people, he's the kind of person that would say so. The reason why I answer your question in the way of answering the gentleman from Kenya is, in this world that we're in right now, speed is of the essence. It's about speed, to Simba's point right now. It's about how fast can we get something to market, not necessarily about the protection of ideas. And when I speak to entrepreneurs, this is when it normally get them really upset. There is no value in an idea. The value of an idea is worth zero. Google was not the first search engine, right? Without a doubt, they were not the first one, right? But it was the implementation and the execution of those businesses, but more importantly, the ecosystems and partnerships that you build up to safeguard that. I myself, I've filed 2 provisional patents in my time, cost $10,000, $15,000. What entrepreneur has that kind of capital right now for an upfront investment? But what a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about is it's not the patent, a piece of paper, but it's the ability to defend that patent in the country which you filed. It's a long, arduous process. So to answer the question succinctly, how do you protect? It's about saying, how do I de-risk my idea, my product, my service from an investor's point of view, which means how more or how faster into the marketplace am I? Am I at an idea? Am I at MVP? Am I at prototype? Do I have something that's already sellable? The faster you are and the quicker you are into the marketplace with something tangible safeguards you, but then bring in the partners and the ecosystem that will allow you to scale and grow. That's the way that you protect an idea, not a piece of paper, which is very difficult to protect.
Thank you, Craig. Lots of ideas from this panel. We were supposed to open up your minds and open up the conversation, because it's going to continue in the next day and a half or 2. So I will not summarize what was said on this panel, because that will close our minds and you'll think like I do, which is terrible. So I'm going to invite you to reflect on what they've said. Ideas are useless, you got to get to the market quickly. Imitation, good. Don't be afraid of imitating, just don't steal them. Don't steal them from, especially Mr. Mwangi here. We got a pot of money, but partnerships and negotiations of how we share knowledge with one another is vitally important. But I really like Marie-Christina, host's last idea, and what makes her excited. It is those bright eyes and the young people who are shaping the world, who have these optimism that they can create the world that they really want to live in. Those innovators are the ones that we really need to nurture, promote, and support in everything that we do. And I hope we will be hearing from them during these workshops. Go and visit their booths. And for now, I invite you to applaud my panel here. Thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the 4 questions and comments that came. And I invite you, here's the note from my bosses. Your advisor, the next sessions will run between 12:30, which is in like 3 minutes from now, and 2 p.m. So lunch will be at 2. So you have 90 minutes to workshop some of the ideas that you heard here and some of the ideas that you'll be hearing more of. If you don't have a program, can I take 1 minute of your time and tell you very quickly through this fine print where it is? We have a workshop on developing venture capital in Africa. We have a workshop on, I gotta use my glasses off here, alternative financing, philanthropy, enterprise, startups and SMEs, innovation. Oh, this is the wrong day. Sorry, wrong day. See, I'm getting old. Thank you, Jacob. Let me take this off again. So, meeting the basics, water, energy, food nexus in room AD7. Ensuring resilience, technological and planetary shifts. Oh, big questions here. AD number 1. Innovation Lab, the future of healthcare and societal well-being. In AD4. In here, we'll be building skills and human capability for the 21st century. Transforming African agriculture will be in AD10. Innovation Lab, the future of peace and justice. This should be very exciting. In AD11 and AD12 for you, Simbo, EU-Africa partnership. That's where you go and talk to Maria Christina about leveling the playing field. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Have a fantastic, one more from the ambassador here.
Is only to inform you, we have an app where you can meet all the need to inform you, we don't need to read it, but if you download the app in Africa Innovation Summit, I suppose Google is working, the Apple maybe is already online. So you will find how to interact, because we said it's a conference without paper. And for this, you will find in the app all the information you need, the speakers, who there are, all the information in your hand. Thank you.
Thank you. So off you go to your favorite workshop, and we'll see you at lunch. Have a great morning, afternoon.